Margaret Sullivan's knees hit the dirt. Her arms shook, but she didn't let go of Lily. She would never let go. The rider came closer. Margaret reached for the knife in her boot, the only thing the thieves hadn't taken. "Stay back," she rasped. "I got nothing left. But I'll kill you before you touch her." The man stopped his horse. Sunlight caught the star on his chest. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I ain't here to hurt you. I'm here to bring you home." Will a broken sheriff and a desperate widow find redemption in each other? Stay with us until the end, and comment your city below so we can see how far this story travels across the world. The knife felt heavy in Margaret's hand. 3 days ago, she'd never held a weapon. 3 days ago, she'd had a horse supplies money sewn into her petticoat. 3 days ago, she'd still believed God was listening. Now she crouched in the Montana dust with an 18-month-old baby pressed against her chest and a rusted kitchen knife pointed at a stranger. "I said stay back." The man didn't move. He sat on his horse like he had all the time in the world, hands resting easy on the saddle horn. The star on his chest caught the dying light. "That knife ain't gonna do much, ma'am. Blade's near rusted through." "It'll do enough." "Reckon it might." He tilted his head, studying her. "But I ain't planning on giving you cause to use it." Lily whimpered against Margaret's shoulder. The sound cut through everything. The fear, the exhaustion, the desperate hope that this man might actually be what he appeared to be. "She hungry?" the man asked. "What's it to you?" "Nothing, just asking." Margaret's arm trembled. The knife dipped an inch before she forced it back up. "You're a sheriff. Was a deputy in Virginia. Sheriff here in Copper Ridge going on 4 years now." He reached slowly into his vest pocket. "Got papers if you want to see them." "Throw them down. Don't come no closer." He tossed a folded document. It landed in the dirt 3 feet from her knees. Margaret didn't pick it up. Couldn't. If she let go of Lily, or the knife, she'd fall apart completely. "My name's Nathaniel Colton," the man said. "Folks call me Nate. Town's about 6 miles east of here. Got a doctor. Got food. Got a place you can rest." "And what do you want for all that?" Something flickered across his face. Pain, maybe, or understanding. "Nothing, ma'am. That ain't how it works. Everything costs something. Not this." He swung down from his horse, moving slow like she was a spooked animal. Up close, he was tall. Broad shoulders, weathered face, gray eyes that held too much history. "When's the last time you ate?" Margaret couldn't remember. Yesterday. The day before, time had blurred into an endless stretch of walking and praying and trying to keep Lily alive. "Doesn't matter." "It matters." "Why?" The word cracked in her throat. "You don't know me. Don't owe me nothing. Why does it matter?" Nate Colton looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at Lily, at the baby's pale face and cracked lips and the tiny fist clutching Margaret's torn dress. "Because I had a daughter once," he said quietly. "And I'd want someone to help her mama if she was in trouble." The knife slipped from Margaret's fingers. She didn't mean to drop it. Her body just gave out, all the fight draining away at once. She caught herself on one hand, the other arm locked tight around Lily. "Hey, easy now." Nate was beside her in 2 strides, kneeling in the dust. "I got you. Both of you. Don't. I ain't gonna hurt you." His voice was low, steady. The kind of voice you used with frightened horses or crying children. "Just let me help you onto the horse. Can you do that?" Margaret looked up at him, searched his face for the lie, the trap. The thing that would prove this was too good to be true. She found nothing but tired gray eyes and a jaw set with purpose. "My name's Margaret," she heard herself say. "Margaret Sullivan. And this is Lily." "Nice to meet you, Margaret." "Lily." Nate's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "Now let's get you somewhere safe." The ride to Copper Ridge took 2 hours. Nate kept the horse at a walk, one arm steady around Margaret, to keep her from sliding off the saddle. She'd stopped fighting him somewhere in the first mile, her body giving up what her mind refused to surrender. She slumped against his chest with Lily between them, too exhausted to be embarrassed. "How'd you end up out here?" Nate asked. His voice rumbled through his chest, close to her ear. "If you don't mind my asking." "Looking for my brother, Patrick Sullivan. He worked the mines." Nate was quiet for a beat too long. "You know him?" Margaret said, not a question. "I knew him." The past tense hit her like a fist. She'd expected it, had been expecting it since the letter stopped coming 6 months ago, but expecting and knowing were different things. "How?" "Cave-in, last March. He went fast, if that helps any." It didn't. Nothing helped. But Margaret had learned to swallow grief like bitter medicine, so she just nodded against Nate's shoulder and held Lily tighter. "I'm sorry," Nate said. "You didn't kill him." "No, but I'm still sorry." They rode in silence after that. The sun sank lower, painting the mountains gold and rose. Margaret watched the colors blur through tears she refused to let fall. Patrick was dead. Her husband was dead. Her parents were dead. Everyone she'd ever loved was gone, and all she had left was an 18-month-old baby and the clothes on her back. "My husband died 4 months ago," she said suddenly. "Mining accident in Nevada. Tunnel collapsed." Nate's arm tightened slightly. "That's a hard thing." "It was his first week. I'd talked him into taking the job. Said the money was good, said we needed it for Lily." Margaret's voice went flat. "He didn't want to go underground. He was scared of the dark. Did you know that a grown man's scared of the dark? And I made him go anyway." "You didn't make him do nothing. Man makes his own choices. I pushed him. And he chose to listen. That ain't on you." Margaret wanted to argue, wanted to cling to the guilt because at least it was something to hold on to. But she was too tired, and Lily was stirring, and somewhere ahead she could see lights flickering through the dusk. "That's Copper Ridge," Nate said. "We'll go to the Reverend first. He's got a spare room and his wife makes a stew that could raise the dead." "I can't pay for—" "Nobody's asking you to pay." Nate's voice was firm. "You're in trouble. Town helps folks in trouble. That's how it works out here. That ain't how it worked where I came from. Well, you ain't there no more." Copper Ridge was small. One main street, maybe 20 buildings, a church with a white steeple catching the last of the light. People stopped to stare as Nate rode in with Margaret and Lily. "That the sheriff? Who's he got with him? Lord have mercy, look at that baby." Margaret kept her eyes forward. She'd learned long ago that people's stares couldn't hurt you if you didn't let them. Nate pulled up in front of a modest house beside the church. "Reverend Whitmore," he called out. "Got someone needs your help." The door opened. A man stepped onto the porch, gray-haired, kind-faced, wearing a minister's collar. Behind him came a woman about the same age, wiping her hands on an apron. "Nathaniel, what on earth?" The Reverend's eyes landed on Margaret and Lily. His face changed. "Bring them inside. Now. Martha, get water boiling." Everything after that happened in a blur. Martha Whitmore took Lily from Margaret's arms, clucking over the baby's dry lips and pale cheeks. The Reverend guided Margaret to a chair by the fire and pressed a cup of water into her hands. "Small sips," he instructed. "Too fast and you'll be sick." Margaret drank. The water was cool and clean and tasted like life itself. "Where did you find her?" Martha asked Nate, who stood near the door like he wasn't sure he belonged inside. "North Road, about 6 miles out. She was walking." Walking in this heat with a baby. "Had a horse until 3 days ago. Got robbed on the trail. Took everything but the clothes on her back." Martha's face went hard. "Animals. That's what they are. Animals." "She was heading for Patrick Sullivan's place," Nate added quietly. "Looking for her brother." Reverend Whitmore's expression shifted. He glanced at his wife, then back at Margaret. "I see. Patrick's dead," Margaret said. The words came out steady, empty. "The sheriff told me." "I'm sorry, child. He was a good man. Worked hard, went to church every Sunday." The Reverend sat down across from her. "You came all this way to find him. Had nowhere else to go. And now—" Margaret looked down at the cup in her hands. Watched the water tremble with the shaking she couldn't control. "I don't know," she whispered. "I don't know anything anymore." The end. Lily's fever started that night. Margaret woke to the baby's whimpering and knew immediately something was wrong. Lily's skin was hot to the touch, her breathing shallow and quick. "No, no, no, no." Margaret was out of bed before she knew she was moving Lily in her arms. "Help, someone, help!" Martha Whitmore appeared in the doorway. One look at Lily and her face went white. "Samuel!" she shouted. "Get the sheriff! Tell him to bring Doc Wilson!" "What's wrong with her?" Margaret's voice broke. "What's happening?" "Fever. Could be from the dehydration. Could be something she caught on the trail. We need the doctor." Martha took charge with the efficiency of a woman who'd seen her share of crises. "Keep her cool. Wet cloth on her forehead. I'll boil willow bark." The next few hours were the longest of Margaret's life. She sat in a rocking chair by the window, holding Lily against her chest, singing the songs her mother used to sing. The baby burned in her arms like a tiny furnace, and Margaret couldn't do anything but rock and pray and wait. The doctor came, an older man with steady hands and a grave expression. He examined Lily while Margaret watched with her heart in her throat. "It's the heat and the dehydration," he said finally. "She's fighting hard. Strong lungs on this one." "Will she live?" Doc Wilson looked at her with eyes that had delivered too much bad news over the years. "I've seen babies pull through worse, and I've seen them—" He stopped. Started again. "We'll do everything we can. The rest is up to God." Margaret didn't trust God anymore, but she nodded anyway, because what else could she do? Nate appeared sometime after midnight. Margaret didn't know how long he'd been there. She looked up from Lily's face, and he was just standing in the corner, hat in his hands, watching. "You should be sleeping," she said. "So should you." "I can't." "I know." He moved closer. In the lamplight, he looked exhausted. The lines around his eyes cut deep. "Mind if I sit with you?" Margaret shook her head. He pulled up a chair and sat down beside her. Didn't say anything. Didn't try to offer false comfort or empty promises. Just sat there solid and quiet while she rocked her fevered baby and fought back tears. "Tell me about your daughter," Margaret said after a while. Nate went still. "You said you had a daughter. What was her name?" A long silence. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "Emma. Emma Rose. She was 2 years old when she died." "I'm sorry." "So am I." Nate stared at his hands. "Her mama, my wife Sarah, she died same time. Scarlet fever. Went through the town like wildfire. I was 3 days ride away chasing outlaws." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Important work. Couldn't wait. That's what I told myself." "You couldn't have known." "No, but I should have been there." Margaret understood that guilt. The way it lived in your chest like a second heartbeat. The way it colored every moment of every day. "Lily's all I have left," she said. "If she dies, she ain't gonna die." "You don't know that." Nate looked at her. His gray eyes were fierce in the lamplight. "No," he admitted. "I don't, but I'm gonna sit here with you all night, and if she needs anything, water, medicine, someone to ride for help, I'll be here. You understand? You ain't alone in this. Not tonight. Not while I'm around." Margaret felt something crack open in her chest. Something she'd kept locked away since Michael's death, since her parents' death, since she'd learned that loving people meant losing them. Why? She asked. Why do you care what happens to us? Nate was quiet for a long moment. When he answered, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because 3 years ago, I watched my whole world burn down. And nobody was there. Nobody helped. Nobody even noticed. He met her eyes. I ain't gonna be the man who looks the other way. Not ever again. Lily's fever broke at dawn. Margaret felt the change before she saw it. The baby's skin cooling under her palm, the breathing easing into something natural and deep. She pulled back the blanket and found Lily's eyes open, blinking up at her. "Mama?" Lily croaked. Margaret burst into tears. She was still crying when Doc Wilson came to check on them. Still crying when Martha brought breakfast. Still crying when Reverend Whitmore said a prayer of thanks. It was the ugly kind of crying, the kind that came from a place so deep it didn't have words. Nate had fallen asleep in his chair sometime in the early hours. He woke when Margaret's sobs got loud, and he was on his feet before his eyes were fully open. "What is she?" "She's okay." Margaret laughed through her tears. "She's okay. The fever broke." Nate looked at Lily, looked at Margaret. His shoulders dropped like someone had cut the strings holding him up. "Thank God," he breathed. "Thank God." Martha bustled in with a tray of food. "Eat," she commanded Margaret. "Both of you. I won't have folks fainting in my house from hunger." Margaret ate. The eggs were perfect, the bread still warm, the coffee strong enough to wake the dead. She ate until her stomach protested, then ate some more because her body demanded it. Across the room, Nate ate too. He kept glancing at Lily, at Margaret, like he couldn't quite believe they were real. "What happens now?" Margaret asked when the plates were empty. "I meant what I said before. I got no money, no family, nothing to offer this town." "You got an education?" Reverend Whitmore asked. He'd come in while they were eating, settling into a chair by the fire. "My mother was a school teacher. She taught me reading, writing, arithmetic, history, geography. Why?" The Reverend and Martha exchanged a look. "Our teacher left 2 months ago," Martha explained. "Married a soldier from Fort Ellis. We've got 15 children in this town, and no one to teach them. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you an opportunity." Reverend Whitmore leaned forward. "The position comes with a small salary and use of the cottage behind the church. It's modest, but it's warm and dry. You and Lily would have a home." Margaret stared at him. "You don't know me. You don't know if I can teach. Why would you?" "Because I've watched you fight for that baby's life all night," the Reverend said simply. "Anyone with that much love in them has something worth giving to children." Margaret looked at Nate. He was standing by the window, morning light catching the silver in his hair, and his expression was careful, guarded. "What do you think?" she asked him. Something flickered in his gray eyes. "I think you've got nothing to lose and everything to gain. I think them children need a teacher bad. And I think—" He stopped. "Think what?" "I think this town could use someone like you." Margaret turned back to the Reverend. She thought about Patrick dead in a mine somewhere, about Michael buried in Nevada dirt, about her parents gone so long now she could barely remember their faces. She thought about Lily sleeping peacefully in her arms for the first time in days. "Yes," she said. "I'll do it." Martha clapped her hands. Reverend Whitmore smiled, and Nate just nodded like he'd expected nothing less. But when he turned to leave, Margaret caught something in his face that looked almost like hope. "Sheriff," she called after him. He stopped at the door. "Ma'am, thank you for everything." Nate's mouth curved, not quite a smile, but the closest thing she'd seen from him yet. "Welcome to Copper Ridge, Margaret Sullivan." Then he was gone, boots echoing on the wooden porch, and Margaret was left holding her daughter in a stranger's house, in a town she'd never heard of, feeling something she hadn't felt in months. Not hope exactly, but the possibility of hope. And sometimes that was enough to start. The cottage behind the church was smaller than Margaret expected. One room. A bed in the corner, a stove against the wall, a table with 2 chairs. A window that faced east, letting in the morning light. That was all. "It ain't much," Martha Whitmore said, wringing her hands. The last teacher was a single woman. She didn't need space for a baby. Margaret set Lily down on the bed and watched her daughter bounce on the mattress, giggling. "It's perfect," she said, and meant it. 2 weeks passed. Margaret learned the rhythms of Copper Ridge. She learned which floorboard creaked in the church, which well had the sweetest water, which path led to the schoolhouse fastest. She learned the names of her students, 15 children ranging from 6 to 14, and their temperaments, their struggles, their small victories. She learned other things, too. She learned that Nate Colton walked past her cottage every morning at dawn, checking the locks, checking the windows, checking that she and Lily were safe. He never knocked, never announced himself, but she always knew he was there. She learned that his sister Ruth ran the boarding house on Main Street with an iron fist and a sharp tongue. Ruth had red hair and green eyes, and a way of looking at Margaret that felt like being weighed on a scale. She learned that a man named Jacob Mercer owned the saloon and 2 of the smaller mines, and that he smiled too much and stood too close when he talked to her. "Mrs. Sullivan." Mercer caught her outside the general store one afternoon. "Allow me to carry those for you." "I can manage, Mr. Mercer." "I'm sure you can, but a lady shouldn't have to." He took the packages from her arms before she could protest. "How are you finding our little town?" "Everyone's been very kind." "Have they?" Mercer's smile widened. "I'm glad to hear it, though I imagine it must be lonely. A widow all alone with only a baby for company." Margaret felt her spine stiffen. "I'm not lonely. Of course not. I only meant—" He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell whiskey on his breath. "If you ever need anything, Mrs. Sullivan, anything at all, my door is always open." "Thank you, Mr. Mercer. I'll keep that in mind." She took her packages back and walked away without looking at him, but she felt his eyes on her all the way down the street. That night, someone knocked on her door. Margaret grabbed the poker from beside the stove before answering. "Who's there?" "Ruth Colton. Open up." Margaret cracked the door. Nate's sister stood on the porch, arms, crossed expression, unreadable. "Can I help you?" "That depends." Ruth pushed past her into the cottage without waiting for an invitation. "I saw you talking to Jacob Mercer today." "He offered to carry my packages." "I'm sure he did." Ruth turned to face her. In the lamplight, the resemblance to Nate was striking, same strong jaw, same direct gaze. "Let me be plain with you, Mrs. Sullivan. Mercer's interested in more than carrying your packages." "I gathered that." "Did you also gather that he's dangerous?" Margaret set down the poker. "He owns half the town. Men like that usually are." "So you're not a fool." Ruth's posture relaxed slightly. "Good. I was worried my brother had picked up another stray who couldn't think for herself." "Your brother didn't pick me up. He helped me when I needed help. There's a difference." "Is there?" Ruth's eyes traveled around the cottage, taking in Lily asleep in the corner, the worn clothes hanging by the stove, the single lamp burning low. "You got nothing, no family, no money, no connections, and suddenly you're living in the church cottage with a teaching position, and my brother watching your house every morning like a guard dog. I didn't ask for any of that." "No, you didn't have to." Ruth moved toward the door, then stopped. "I'm not trying to run you off, Mrs. Sullivan. Lord knows this town needs a teacher, but my brother's been through enough. He don't need another broken thing to try and fix." Margaret's temper flared. "I'm not broken." "We're all broken, honey. Question is whether we bleed on the people trying to help us." Ruth opened the door. "Just something to think about." She was gone before Margaret could respond. The next morning, Margaret marched into the sheriff's office. Nate looked up from his desk, surprised. Mrs. Sullivan, something wrong? Your sister came to see me last night. Ah. He set down his pen. What did she say? She warned me about Jacob Mercer, and then she warned me about you. Nate's expression didn't change. Ruth's protective. She don't mean nothing by it. She called me a broken thing. Ruth calls everyone that, including herself. Nate stood moving around the desk. Don't let her get under your skin. She's just worried. About what? He was quiet for a moment. About me. About what happens when I... He stopped, started again. It don't matter. Point is, Ruth's bark is worse than her bite. Give her time. She'll come around. Margaret studied him. The careful way he held himself, the distance he maintained even in a small room. She said you watch my cottage every morning. A muscle ticked in his jaw. I walk the town at dawn, check the perimeter. Your cottage happens to be on the route. Is that all it is? Their eyes met, held. No, Nate said quietly. It ain't. Before Margaret could respond, the door burst open. Tommy Wilson, the doctor's 10-year-old son, stood there gasping for breath. Sheriff, you gotta come quick. What happened? It's Mr. Chen, some men from the mine. They're hurting him. Nate was out the door before Tommy finished speaking. Margaret followed, hiking up her skirts to keep pace. The scene on Main Street stopped her cold. William Chen. The Chinese man who ran the laundry was on his knees in the dirt. 3 miners stood over him, their faces twisted with ugly laughter. One of them had a broken bottle. Chen's arm was bleeding. Go back where you came from, Chinaman. This ain't your town. Filthy yellow. That's enough. Nate's voice cut through the noise. He walked into the middle of the group, his hand resting on his gun. Back away from him. Now. The miners hesitated. Their leader, a big man with a scar across his nose, stepped forward. Stay out of this, Sheriff. This don't concern you. Everything that happens in my town concerns me. He ain't even American. He don't belong here. He's got a business license, pays his taxes. Far as I'm concerned, that makes him more American than a man who beats people in the street. The scarred miner's face went red. You taking sides with a Chinaman over white men. I'm taking sides with the law. Nate's hand moved to his holster. Now I'm gonna ask one more time. Back away. The tension stretched like a wire about to snap. Margaret held her breath. She saw the miners weighing their options, saw the crowd gathering, saw Ruth pushing through to stand beside her brother. Then the scarred miner spat in the dirt and stepped back. This ain't over, Sheriff. Reckon it is for today. Nate waited until the miners disappeared into the saloon before kneeling beside Chen. Let me see that arm. It is nothing. Chen's English was accented but clear. Just a scratch. That scratch needs stitches. Come on, Doc Wilson'll fix you up. As they passed, Margaret Chen stopped. You are the new teacher. Yes. My daughter, Mai. She is 7. She wants to learn. Send her to school tomorrow. She's welcome in my classroom. Chen studied her face. Whatever he saw there made him nod slowly. Thank you, Mrs. Sullivan. That afternoon, Margaret found a basket of vegetables on her doorstep. A note attached read, For the teacher who sees people not colors. W.C. She was still holding the note when Nate appeared. Trouble follows you, she said. Always has. He nodded at the basket. Chen's way of saying thanks. What will happen to those miners? They work for Mercer. Mercer will pay their fines, slap their wrists, send them back to the mine. Nate's jaw tightened. That's how it works when money runs the town. That's not right. No, it ain't. He looked at her. But it's the world we got. Question is, what we do with it. Margaret thought about that all evening. She thought about Ruth's warning, about Mercer's smile, about the hatred in those miners' faces when they looked at William Chen. She thought about Nate walking past her cottage every dawn, checking locks, checking windows. She thought about the way he'd stepped into that fight without hesitation, his hand on his gun, his voice steady as stone. That night, she didn't bar the door. 3 more weeks passed. Margaret's classroom filled with children. Mai Chen sat in the front row drinking in every lesson like water in the desert. Tommy Wilson appointed himself Margaret's assistant, sharpening pencils and cleaning slates. Sarah Jane Mercer, Jacob Mercer's niece, turned out to be the brightest student Margaret had ever taught. And slowly, impossibly, Copper Ridge started to feel like home. Nate came by the schoolhouse most afternoons now, always with a reason, fixing a broken shutter, delivering firewood, checking that the stove was working proper. But he stayed longer than the tasks required, sitting on the porch while Margaret graded papers, listening to her talk about her students. "Tommy's got a real gift for mathematics," she told him one evening. "But his father wants him to be a doctor." Nothing wrong with being a doctor. Nothing wrong with being a mathematician either. People should follow their gifts. "That what you did?" Margaret paused. "My mother was a teacher. I never thought about being anything else." "And your husband? What did he think about you teaching, Michael?" She smiled sadly. "He wanted me to stay home. Said teaching was for spinsters and poor women. I told him I'd go crazy with nothing to do. He said I'd learn to like it." The smile faded. He was wrong about a lot of things. Nate was quiet for a moment. "Ruth told me what she said to you, about being broken. She wasn't wrong. Neither were you." He turned to look at her. "You ain't a thing, Margaret, broken or otherwise. You're a person who's been through hell and come out the other side still standing. That ain't weakness. That's strength." Margaret felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Your sister doesn't see it that way." "My sister's scared, same as me." "Scared of what?" Nate held her gaze. "Scared of caring about someone again. Scared of what happens when you let people in and they—" He stopped. "Never mind. When they leave, when they die." The word hung between them. "Everyone I've ever loved is dead, Margaret. My wife, my daughter, my parents, every single one. And I know that's just life. People die. But knowing don't make it easier." Margaret reached out and took his hand. His fingers were rough, calloused, warm against her palm. "I know," she said softly. "I know exactly what that feels like." They sat like that, as the sun went down, 2 broken people holding on to each other in the gathering dark. The church social was Ruth's idea. "The town needs cheering up," she announced at breakfast one morning. Margaret had started taking meals at the boarding house, partly for the company, and partly because Ruth's cooking was better than anything she could manage on her stove. "After that business with Chen, folks are on edge. A dance will settle things down." "I don't dance," Nate said. "Nobody asked you." Ruth shot him a look. "Though you could stand to make an appearance. Show folks their sheriff ain't completely antisocial." "I'll think about it." "Think fast. It's Saturday." The social drew everyone in town. Reverend Whitmore opened the church hall, Martha organized the food, and someone dragged an old piano out of storage. By sunset, the hall was packed with people laughing and eating and dancing to music that was more enthusiasm than skill. Margaret stood by the punch table, Lily on her hip, watching the crowd. She wore her best dress, a blue calico that Martha had helped her alter, and felt almost pretty for the first time in months. "Mrs. Sullivan." Jacob Mercer appeared at her elbow. "You look lovely this evening." "Thank you, Mr. Mercer." "Might I have the honor of a dance?" "I'm afraid I can't. I've got Lily." "Surely someone could watch her for one dance?" Mercer's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I've been hoping to speak with you about a business proposition." "What kind of proposition?" "This town needs a proper school. Not that cottage behind the church. A real building with real supplies, real books." He leaned closer. "I could make that happen, for the right consideration." Margaret's stomach turned. "And what consideration would that be?" "Have dinner with me, tomorrow night. Just dinner, Mrs. Sullivan. A chance to discuss the future." His hand brushed her arm. "Your future." The lady said she can't dance. Nate's voice came from behind her. Margaret hadn't heard him approach, but suddenly he was there, solid and steady, putting himself between her and Mercer. "Sheriff?" Mercer's smile went cold. "I wasn't aware you two were acquainted." "Everyone in this town is acquainted." Nate's hand rested lightly on Margaret's back. "And Mrs. Sullivan promised me the first dance." Margaret felt her heart skip. "I did." "You did." Nate's eyes held hers. "If you'll still have me." She handed Lily to Martha, who had materialized like magic, and let Nate lead her onto the dance floor. "I don't actually know how to dance," she whispered as his arm went around her waist. "Neither do I. Just follow my lead and try not to step on my feet." They moved together, awkward at first, then finding a rhythm that surprised them both. Margaret felt the warmth of his hand through her dress, the steadiness of his shoulder under her palm. "Thank you," she said, "for rescuing me. Mercer's not the kind of man who takes no for an answer." "I gathered. I should have warned you sooner. Nate's jaw tightened. "I didn't want to scare you off. It takes more than that to scare me. I'm starting to figure that out." He pulled her slightly closer as the music swelled. "Margaret, there's something I need to tell you." "What?" "I've been watching your cottage because—" He stopped. Started again. "Not because it's on my route, because I can't stop thinking about you. About Lily. About what it might be like to— Nate. I know it's too soon. I know you're still grieving. I know I got no right to feel this way. But Nate." Margaret stopped dancing, right there in the middle of the floor with half the town watching. "Stop talking." "What?" She reached up and pressed her hand against his cheek, felt the rough stubble, the heat of his skin, the way his breath caught. "I think about you too," she said. "Every day, every night. I hear your boots on my porch at dawn, and I feel safe for the first time in years. Is that wrong? Is it too soon? I don't know. I don't care." She met his eyes. "I'm tired of being careful. I'm tired of being alone. And when I look at you, I see someone who understands exactly what that feels like." Nate stared at her. Around them, the music played on, couples dancing, people laughing. But in that moment, there was only the two of them and the impossible thing growing between them. "Margaret," he breathed. "Don't say anything. Don't promise anything. Just—" She leaned up and kissed his cheek, soft and quick. "Just keep walking past my cottage every morning. That's enough for now." She stepped back, heart pounding, and walked off the dance floor without looking back. Behind her, she heard Ruth's voice, sharp with surprise. "Nate, Nate, you all right?" And Nate's response so quiet she almost missed it. Yeah, I think maybe I am." The ride home that night was quiet. Nate had offered to escort her, and for once Margaret hadn't argued. Lily was asleep in her arms, heavy and warm, and the stars overhead were thick enough to touch. "Ruth's going to have questions," Margaret said. "Ruth always has questions. She won't like this. Us. Ruth doesn't like anything at first. Give her time." They reached the cottage. Nate helped her down from the wagon, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. "Good night, Margaret." "Good night, Nate." He started to turn away. Stopped. "That thing you said, about feeling safe." His voice was rough. "I ain't felt that way in 3 years. Not until you walked into my town with nothing but a baby and a rusted knife and more courage than any person I ever met." Margaret's throat tightened. "Nate, I don't know what this is, don't know what it's gonna be, but I know I want to find out." He reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "If you'll let me." "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll let you." He smiled then, a real smile, the first she'd ever seen from him. It changed his whole face, made him look younger, lighter, like the man he must have been before grief carved him hollow. Sleep well, Margaret Sullivan. You too, Nathaniel Colton. She watched him drive away, the wagon disappearing into the darkness, and pressed her hand against the warmth still lingering on her cheek. Inside the cottage, she laid Lily in her crib and stood at the window looking out at the stars. For the first time since Michael's death, she let herself imagine a future. Not the future she'd planned, not the one she'd lost, but something new, something unexpected, something that looked like a quiet man with gray eyes and steady hands, and a heart big enough to hold all her broken pieces. It was terrifying. It was wonderful. It was, she realized, the beginning of everything. The weeks after the church social changed everything. Nate stopped pretending his morning walks past Margaret's cottage were routine patrol. He knocked now, brought coffee from Ruth's kitchen, sat on her porch while Lily played at their feet, and they talked about everything and nothing. "Tell me about Sarah," Margaret said one morning. "Your wife." Nate's hands tightened around his cup. "What do you want to know?" "Whatever you want to tell me." He was quiet for a long moment. She was kind. Too kind, maybe. Saw the good in everyone, even folks who didn't deserve it. His voice went soft. "She used to sing to Emma every night. Same song over and over. I can't remember the tune anymore. That bothers me. That I forgot." "You didn't forget. It's just buried. Grief does that." "Does it get easier?" Margaret watched Lily toddle across the porch chasing a butterfly she'd never catch. "No, but it gets different. The sharp edges wear down. You learn to carry it without bleeding." "I don't know if I can do that." "You're already doing it." She reached over and covered his hand with hers. "Every day you wake up. Every day you do your job, look out for this town. That's carrying it, Nate. That's surviving." He turned his hand over, lacing his fingers through hers. "I don't want to just survive anymore." "What do you want?" His gray eyes found hers. "I want to live again. With you. If you'll have me." Before Margaret could answer, hoofbeats sounded on the road. A rider approached, fast dust kicking up behind him. Tommy Wilson, face white with fear. "Sheriff, you gotta come quick." Nate was on his feet. "What happened?" "It's Mr. Chen's laundry. Someone set it on fire." They ran. The laundry was already engulfed when they arrived. Flames shot through the roof smoke, billowing black against the morning sky. William Chen stood in the street, his wife clutching their daughter, watching everything they owned turn to ash. "My." Margaret grabbed the little girl, pulled her close. "Are you hurt? Is anyone hurt?" "We got out," Chen said. His voice was flat, empty. "We got out. But everything else?" "We can rebuild," Nate said. "Buildings can be replaced." "Can they?" Chen turned to face him. For the first time, Margaret saw anger in those careful eyes. "This is the third time, Sheriff. Third time in 2 years. How many times do I rebuild before they burn it again? I'll find who did this." "You know who did this." Chen's voice cracked. "We all know, but knowing doesn't change anything. Not in this town. Not for people like us." The crowd had gathered. Margaret saw familiar faces, her students' parents, shopkeepers, miners from Mercer's operations. Some looked horrified. Others looked away. A few were smiling. "Nothing to see here, folks." Jacob Mercer pushed through the crowd, his voice smooth as butter. "Just an unfortunate accident. Fire hazards in these old buildings, you know." This wasn't an accident. Margaret stepped forward before she could stop herself. This was arson. This was hate. Mercer's eyes went cold. "Careful, Mrs. Sullivan. Making accusations without proof is a serious matter. So is burning down a man's livelihood." "Margaret." Nate's hand found her arm, warning. But she couldn't stop. Wouldn't stop. Not with Mai trembling against her. Not with Chen's wife weeping silently. Not with the smell of smoke burning her throat. "I know what you are," Margaret said to Mercer. "I know what you do. And one day, everyone in this town will know too." Mercer smiled. It was the most terrifying thing she'd ever seen. "I look forward to that day, Mrs. Sullivan. I truly do." He tipped his hat and walked away. That night, Margaret couldn't sleep. She paced her cottage, checked on Lily a dozen times, jumped at every sound. The image of Chen's burning laundry kept playing in her mind over and over. A knock at her door made her heart stop. "It's me," Nate's voice low and rough. "Let me in." She opened the door. He stood there in the darkness, hat in his hands, looking more tired than she'd ever seen him. "You shouldn't have done that today," he said. Challenged Mercer in front of everyone. "Someone had to. Not you." He stepped inside, closed the door behind him. "You don't understand what he's capable of." "Then tell me." Nate was quiet for a long moment. 3 years ago, before I came here, there was another sheriff. Man named Patterson. Good man. Honest. He started asking questions about Mercer's mining operations, asking where all that money was going. What happened to him? They found him at the bottom of a ravine, said his horse spooked, threw him. Nate's jaw tightened. His horse was the most sure-footed animal in the county, hadn't spooked in 10 years. Margaret felt cold spread through her chest. "You think Mercer killed him?" "I think Mercer makes problems disappear, and you just made yourself a problem." "I couldn't just stand there, not while Chen's family watched their life burn." "I know." Nate reached out, cupped her face in his hands. "That's why I—" He stopped. "That's why you scare me, Margaret. Because you're brave in ways that get people killed." "I'm not brave. I'm angry." "Same thing sometimes." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "Promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you won't do anything foolish." "I can't promise that." "Try. For me. For Lily." His voice dropped. "For whatever this is between us." Margaret leaned into his touch. "What is this between us?" "I don't know, but I know I can't lose you. Not now. Not when I just found you." She kissed him then. Not the chaste peck on the cheek from the dance, but a real kiss, deep and desperate, and full of everything she couldn't say. He responded instantly, pulling her close, his hands tangling in her hair. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nate pressed his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. Margaret froze. "What?" "I know it's too fast. I know we barely know each other. But I know how I feel. I know that every morning I wake up thinking about you. Every night I go to sleep wishing you were beside me." His gray eyes burned into hers. "I know that when I'm with you the world makes sense again. And I can't remember the last time anything made sense." "Nate." "You don't have to answer now. I needed you to know. Before anything else happens. Before Mercer does whatever he's planning." His hands tightened on her waist. "I love you, Margaret. I love Lily. And I want to spend whatever time I have left loving you both." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "What about Ruth? What about the town? What will people say?" "I don't care what people say." "Do you?" She thought about it. Really thought about it. About Michael dead in a Nevada mine. About Patrick buried in Montana earth. About all the years she'd spent doing what was expected, being who she was supposed to be. "No," she said. "I don't care." Nate's face transformed. "Is that a yes?" "Yes." She laughed through her tears. "Yes, Nathaniel Colton. I'll marry you." He picked her up and spun her around, and Margaret laughed harder, the sound bubbling up from somewhere she'd forgotten existed. "Put me down. You'll wake Lily." "Let her wake up." He set her down but didn't let go. "Let her see her mama happy. That's a gift, Margaret. That's the best gift you can give her." They stood there holding each other as the night settled around them. For one perfect moment, everything was right. Everything was possible. Then the gunshot shattered the silence. Nate moved like lightning. He shoved Margaret down, drew his weapon, positioned himself between her and the door. "Stay down. Don't move. Nate. Stay down." Another shot, this one closer. Glass shattered somewhere nearby. Lily started screaming. Margaret crawled to the crib, pulled her daughter into her arms. Lily's cries filled the cottage, high and terrified. "It's okay, baby. It's okay. Mama's here." "Margaret." Nate's voice was tight. "I need to go out there." "No. Someone's shooting up the town. I'm the sheriff. It's my job." "They could kill you. They could kill a lot of people if I don't stop them." He crossed to her, kissed her hard and fast. "Get to the church. Reverend Whitmore will protect you. Go out the back. Don't stop for anything. Nate, please? I love you. Now go." He was out the door before she could argue. Margaret grabbed Lily and ran. The church was chaos when she arrived. Women and children huddled in the pews, crying, praying. Martha Whitmore moved among them, offering comfort, handing out blankets. Reverend Whitmore stood at the door with a shotgun, a weapon Margaret had never imagined him holding. "Mrs. Sullivan." Martha rushed toward her. "Thank God. Are you hurt?" "I'm fine. What's happening?" "We don't know. Someone started shooting outside the saloon. The men are trying to—" Another gunshot closer now. Martha flinched. "Trying to stop it." "Where's Nate?" He ran toward the shooting, him and some of the other men. Margaret thrust Lily into Martha's arms. "Take her." Where are you going?" "To help." "Mrs. Sullivan, you can't." But Margaret was already running. She found Nate behind the water trough outside the general store. Blood ran down his arm, staining his shirt dark. "You're hit." She slid down beside him, pressing her hands against the wound. "Just a graze." "What the hell are you doing here?" "Helping. Where's the shooter?" "Roof of the saloon. Got 3 men pinned down across the street." Nate grimaced as she tightened her grip on his arm. "I told you to go to the church." "And I told you I don't take orders." "Margaret, shut up and let me think." She peered around the trough. Across the street she could see William Chen and 2 miners crouched behind an overturned wagon. On the roof, a figure moved in the shadows. "Is that one of Mercer's men?" "Can't tell. Too dark." "If I create a distraction, can you get a clear shot?" "A distraction with what?" Margaret grabbed a lantern from the store window. "With fire." "You can't be serious." "After what they did to Chen's laundry, I'm dead serious." She met his eyes. "Trust me." Nate stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "When you throw it, run for Chen's position. Don't look back." "Nate, don't look back." "Margaret, no matter what you hear, promise me." She kissed him. Quick, fierce, full of everything she couldn't say. "I promise." Then she stood, lit the lantern, and hurled it toward the saloon. The flames caught instantly. The shooter on the roof cried out, stumbling back from the sudden light. Nate fired. The man dropped. Margaret ran. She made it to Chen's position just as more gunfire erupted. But this time it was different, controlled, purposeful. The men of Copper Ridge had rallied surrounding the saloon, cutting off any escape. "Mrs. Sullivan?" Chen stared at her like she'd grown a second head. "What are you doing here?" "Same as you, fighting back." The shooting stopped as suddenly as it started. Voices called out in the darkness, checking for wounded, confirming the threat was neutralized. Then Nate was there, pulling Margaret into his arms, holding her so tight she couldn't breathe. "Don't ever do that again," he said into her hair. "Don't ever—" "I had to help." "You could have died." "So could you." She pulled back to look at him. "We're in this together, Nate. Whatever comes. That's what marriage means, isn't it?" He laughed a broken, disbelieving sound. "You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met." "Is that a problem?" "No." He kissed her forehead. "No, it ain't a problem at all." Dawn revealed the truth. 3 men dead on the saloon roof, all wearing bandanas to hide their faces, all carrying weapons traced back to Mercer's mining operation. "This doesn't prove anything," Mercer said when Nate confronted him. They stood in the middle of Main Street, half the town watching. "Anyone could have stolen those guns." "That's convenient." "It's the truth." Mercer's smile was ice. "You got no evidence linking me to anything, Sheriff. And without evidence, you got nothing." "I got 3 dead men who worked for you. Former employees. I let them go last month. Ask anyone." Nate stepped closer. "I know what you are, Mercer. I know what you've done. And I'm going to prove it if it takes the rest of my life." Bold words from a man who couldn't even save his own family. The silence that followed was absolute. Margaret saw Nate's face change. Saw the pain flash through his eyes, followed by rage so pure it was almost beautiful. "Nate." She grabbed his arm. "Don't. He doesn't get to talk about them." "I know, but not like this. Not in front of everyone." She pitched her voice low for his ears only. "He wants you to attack him. Wants you to give him a reason to have you removed. Don't give him that satisfaction." Nate's hand trembled on his gun. Every line of his body screamed for violence. But slowly, inch by inch, he stepped back. "This ain't over, Mercer." "No." Mercer's eyes slid to Margaret. "No, I don't suppose it is." He tipped his hat and walked away whistling. Ruth found them an hour later. She burst into the sheriff's office, red hair flying, green eyes wild. "Is it true? Is it true you proposed to her?" Nate looked up from the report he was writing. "Who told you?" "Martha Whitmore." "Who heard from Chen's wife?" "Who heard from—" Ruth threw her hands up. "Does it matter? The whole town knows." "Good. Saves me the trouble of announcing it." Ruth's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Nate, you've known this woman 2 months. I knew Sarah 2 weeks before I proposed. That was different. How—" Ruth turned to Margaret, who stood quietly by the window. "Did you put him up to this? Did you trick him somehow?" "Ruth." Nate's voice cracked like a whip. "That's enough." "It's not enough. She shows up out of nowhere with a baby and a sob story, and suddenly you're ready to throw your whole life away." "She saved my life last night." Nate stood moving to Margaret's side. "She ran into gunfire to help me." "Does that sound like someone looking for a free ride?" Ruth faltered. "What?" "Ask Chen. Ask anyone who was there." Nate's arm went around Margaret. "This woman has more courage than anyone I've ever met. And if you can't see that, then maybe you're the one who needs to open your eyes." The silence stretched between them. Then Ruth did something Margaret had never expected. Her eyes filled with tears. "I can't lose you," she whispered to her brother. "You're all I have left." "You're not losing me." Nate crossed to his sister, pulled her into a hug. "You're gaining a family. Margaret, Lily, they're not replacing anyone. They're just adding to what we have." "How can you be sure?" "I can't, but I'm sure I want to try." He pulled back, held Ruth at arm's length. "Can you trust me? Can you give her a chance?" Ruth looked at Margaret, really looked for the first time without suspicion or fear. "You love him?" she asked. "Yes." "You'll take care of him when he forgets to eat, or works too late, or drinks too much after a bad day?" "Yes." "And you won't leave, won't run when things get hard?" Margaret thought about the fire and the gunshots and the hatred in Mercer's eyes. "I'm still here, aren't I?" Something shifted in Ruth's expression. "Yeah, you are." She crossed the room, stopped in front of Margaret. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Then Ruth stuck out her hand. "Welcome to the family, Margaret Sullivan. Don't make me regret this." Margaret shook it. "I won't." That night, after Ruth had gone, and the town had settled into uneasy quiet, Margaret and Nate sat on the porch of the sheriff's office watching the stars. "When do you want to get married?" he asked. "Christmas, if you can wait that long." "Christmas," he smiled. That's 3 months. Is that too long? After waiting 3 years to feel alive again, no. It ain't too long at all. He pulled her close, pressed a kiss to her temple. I'd wait forever for you, Margaret Sullivan. Forever and a day. She leaned into him, letting his warmth seep into her bones. No more waiting. We've both done enough of that. No more waiting, he agreed. Just living, starting now. Above them, the stars wheeled on in their ancient dance, indifferent to the small dramas of human hearts. But Margaret didn't mind. She had everything she needed right here, a man who loved her, a daughter who needed her, and a future that stretched out bright and terrifying and full of possibility. Whatever came next, they would face it together. That was enough. That was everything. October brought cold winds and trouble. Margaret felt it first in the way people looked at her. The whispers that stopped when she walked into the general store. The mothers who pulled their children closer when she passed on the street. "What's happening?" she asked Ruth one morning at the boarding house. "Why is everyone acting strange?" Ruth's face went tight. "You ain't heard." "Heard what?" "Mercer's been talking, spreading stories about you and Nate." Margaret's stomach dropped. What kind of stories? The kind that ruin a woman's reputation. Ruth set down her coffee cup. "He's saying you two been together before the engagement. That Lily might not be your dead husband's child at all. That's a lie. I know it's a lie. You know it's a lie. But half this town believes whatever comes out of Mercer's mouth." Ruth leaned forward. "He's trying to destroy you, Margaret. If he can't have you, he'll make sure no one else wants you either." Margaret felt sick. She thought about her students, their innocent faces. Thought about the parents who trusted her with their children's education. "The school board," she whispered. "They'll remove me. They're meeting tonight. Reverend Whitmore's trying to talk them down, but Mercer's got friends on that board." Margaret stood so fast her chair fell backward. "Where's Nate?" "Rode out this morning. Some trouble at the Morrison Ranch. Won't be back until tomorrow." Tomorrow might be too late. She ran. The school board meeting was in the church hall. By the time Margaret arrived, half the town had gathered outside, buzzing with gossip and speculation. There she is, shameless woman, teaching our children with that kind of morals. Margaret pushed through the crowd, ignoring the voices, the pointed fingers, the ugly words. She burst through the church doors and found herself facing 5 men seated at a long table. Mayor Harrison, Reverend Whitmore, the banker Mr. Collins, the blacksmith Tom Foster, and Jacob Mercer, his smile sharp as a blade. "Mrs. Sullivan." Mayor Harrison's voice was cold. "This is a closed meeting." "A meeting about me. I have a right to defend myself." "There's nothing to defend," Mercer said smoothly. "The facts speak for themselves." "What facts?" Margaret stepped forward. "What evidence do you have beyond your own poisonous tongue?" "Margaret," Reverend Whitmore started. "No. I want to hear it. I want to hear exactly what Mr. Mercer is accusing me of." Mercer's smile widened. "Very well. I'm accusing you of immoral conduct with our sheriff, of deceiving this town about your character, of being unfit to teach the children of Copper Ridge." "Based on what?" "Based on the fact that you moved into a cottage alone, invited a man into your home at all hours, and accepted his proposal after knowing him barely 2 months. Mercer spread his hands. "What else are we to think? You could think that 2 lonely people found comfort in each other. You could think that a widow and a widower, both carrying grief, recognized something worth saving." Margaret's voice shook with rage. "You could think the best of people instead of the worst. But that's not what you do, is it? Mr. Mercer, you destroy. It's all you know how to do." The room went silent. Mercer's face changed. The smooth mask slipped, revealing something cold and reptilian beneath. "Careful, Mrs. Sullivan. Your accusations could be considered slander." "Truth isn't slander." "And what truth would that be?" Margaret took a breath. The truth about the fire at Chen's Laundry. The truth about the shooting last month. The truth about Sheriff Patterson. The name hit the room like a thunderclap. Collins the banker went pale. Foster the blacksmith shifted uncomfortably. Even Mayor Harrison looked shaken. Only Mercer remained still, his eyes locked on Margaret's. "Patterson died in an accident," he said softly. "Everyone knows that." "Everyone knows what you told them." Margaret turned to the other board members. "Ask yourselves, how many accidents happen around Mr. Mercer? How many people who oppose him end up dead or ruined?" She pointed at Mercer. "This man burned down William Chen's livelihood. He hired gunmen to terrorize our town, and now he's trying to destroy me because I won't submit to his advances." "That's a serious accusation," Mayor Harrison said. "It's the truth, and deep down, every person in this room knows it." The silence stretched. Then Reverend Whitmore stood. "I move that we table this discussion until Sheriff Colton can be present. This concerns his fiancée, and he deserves a voice in these proceedings." "Seconded," Tom Foster said quickly. "All in favor?" 3 hands went up. Whitmore, Foster, Collins. Mayor Harrison hesitated, then raised his hand. "Motion carries. We'll reconvene tomorrow evening." Mercer's jaw tightened. "This isn't over." "No," Margaret said. "It isn't." She walked out with her head high, but her hands were shaking. She'd bought time, nothing more. Tomorrow, everything would change. That night, someone threw a rock through her window. Margaret was reading to Lily when it happened. The crash of glass, the thud of stone, the spray of shards across the floor. Lily screamed. Margaret grabbed her daughter and ran to the corner, pressing them both against the wall. Her heart hammered. Her mind raced. "Whore!" a voice from outside. "Get out of our town. More rocks. More breaking glass." Lily's cries grew louder. Then another voice, sharp and commanding. "Get away from there, now! Ruth!" Margaret heard the unmistakable sound of a shotgun being cocked. "I said get back. Next one of you throws something, I'll blow your arm off." Running footsteps, retreating shouts, then silence. The door burst open. Ruth stood there, shotgun in hand, red hair wild around her face. "You hurt?" "No, we're okay." "Like hell you are." Ruth crossed to them, pulled Margaret and Lily into a fierce hug. "Come on. You're staying at the boarding house tonight." "Ruth, I can't." "You can and you will. I ain't letting you spend another minute in this house alone." Ruth's voice broke. "Damn it, Margaret. Your family now. Let me protect you." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Just move." They ran through the darkness, Ruth's shotgun at the ready. The boarding house was warm and bright when they arrived. Ruth settled Margaret and Lily in her own room, then stood guard in the hallway. "Get some sleep," she ordered. "I'll wake you if anything happens." "Ruth." Margaret caught her hand. "Why are you doing this? A month ago you wanted me gone." Ruth was quiet for a moment. "A month ago I was scared. Scared of losing Nate to someone new. Scared of being alone." She squeezed Margaret's fingers. "But watching you stand up to Mercer today, watching you fight for yourself and your daughter, I realized something." "What?" "You ain't the one I should be scared of. Mercer is." Ruth's eyes hardened. "And tomorrow, we're going to finish this, together." Nate rode in at dawn. He'd heard the news on the trail, a rider from town passing word about the meeting, the confrontation, the attack on Margaret's cottage. He came through the boarding house door like a storm covered in dust and wild with fear. "Where is she? Where's Margaret?" "Upstairs." Ruth grabbed his arm. "She's fine. Lily's fine. I got them out before anyone got hurt." "Mercer." "Who else?" Nate's face went dark. "I'm going to kill him." "No, you ain't." Ruth stepped in front of him. "That's exactly what he wants. He's trying to provoke you, make you do something stupid so he can have you arrested or shot." She held his gaze. Think, Nate. Use that head of yours. He attacked my family. And we'll make him pay. But not like this. Not with blood. Then how? The board meets again tonight. Margaret planted seeds yesterday. Made people think. If we can prove what a Mercer's done, really prove it, the whole town will turn on him. Proof, Nate laughed bitterly. We've been looking for proof for 3 years. Then maybe it's time we looked harder. Margaret appeared at the top of the stairs. Lily was in her arms, sleepy and confused, but unharmed. Nate took the stairs 3 at a time. He pulled them both into his arms, holding them so tight Margaret could barely breathe. I should have been here, he said into her hair. I should have been here to protect you. You can't be everywhere, Nate. I can try. He pulled back, looked into her eyes. I'm sorry. For all of this. For Mercer, for the town, for everything you've had to face because of me. None of this is because of you. Yes, it is. Mercer hates me. Has since I first took this badge. You're just the weapon he's using to hurt me. Then let's take that weapon away. Margaret's chin lifted. Let's get married. Today. Right now. Nate stared at her. What? If we're married, his accusations lose their power. I'm not a loose woman seducing the sheriff. I'm your wife, the mother of your children. She took his hand. We were going to do this anyway. Let's just do it sooner. Margaret, you can't make a decision like this because of Mercer. I'm not making it because of Mercer. I'm making it because I love you, because I don't want to wait another day to be your wife. Her voice softened. Because life is short, Nate. We both know that better than most. Why waste another minute? Ruth appeared beside them. She's got a point, brother. You're taking her side now. I'm taking the side of common sense. Ruth crossed her arms. Marry her, make it official, then face Mercer as a united front. Nate looked between them, his sister and the woman he loved, both fierce, both stubborn, both absolutely certain. Reverend Whitmore, he said slowly. He can perform the ceremony. Right now. Margaret's eyes widened. You said you didn't want to wait. A smile tugged at his mouth. Neither do I. They found the Reverend in his study, working on Sunday's sermon. I need you to marry us, Nate said without preamble. Today. Right now. Reverend Whitmore removed his spectacles. This is somewhat irregular. So is everything else that's happened in this town? Margaret stepped forward. Please, Reverend. You know us. You know our hearts. Is there any reason we shouldn't be married? The Reverend studied them for a long moment. No, I suppose there isn't. Then will you do it? Another pause. Then Whitmore smiled. It would be my honor. The ceremony took place in the small church with only Ruth, Martha, and little Lily as witnesses. No fancy dress, no flowers, no celebration. Just 2 people standing before God making promises they intended to keep. Do you, Nathaniel James Colton, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. And do you, Margaret Ann Sullivan, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? Margaret looked at Nate, saw the love in his gray eyes, the hope, the fear, saw everything they'd built and everything they stood to lose. I do. Then, by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. Reverend Whitmore smiled. You may kiss the bride. Nate kissed her. Soft and sweet and full of promise. Behind them, Ruth wiped her eyes. Martha clapped. Lily laughed and clapped too, not understanding but sensing the joy. Mrs. Colton, Nate murmured against Margaret's lips. I like the sound of that. So do I. She kissed him again. So do I. The board meeting that evening was chaos. Word had spread about the wedding. When Margaret walked into the church hall on Nate's arm, wearing a simple gold band on her finger, the room exploded in whispers. They're married. When did that happen? Did you hear about the attack last night? Mercer's face went white, then red. This changes nothing. It changes everything, Nate said coolly. Margaret is my wife now. Any accusations you make against her, you make against me, against my family, against the office of sheriff. The accusations stand regardless of your marital status. Then prove them. Nate stepped forward. You've been spreading lies about my wife for weeks. Put up or shut up, Mercer. Show us your evidence. The room went silent. Mercer's eyes darted to the board members. Collins looked away. Foster studied his hands. Even Mayor Harrison seemed uncomfortable. I have witnesses, Mercer said finally. People who saw, people you paid. Margaret interrupted. People who work for you. People who are afraid to say no to the man who controls their livelihoods. How dare you? How dare I speak the truth? Margaret's voice rang through the hall. How dare I stand up to a bully who burns buildings and hires gunmen and destroys anyone who opposes him? She turned to face the crowd, saw her students' parents, her neighbors, the people she'd come to know and care for. I came to this town with nothing, a baby and the clothes on my back. You took me in, gave me work, gave me a home. Her voice cracked. This man wants to take that away. Not because I've done anything wrong, but because I wouldn't do what he wanted. That's a lie, Mercer shouted. Is it? Margaret faced him. Then why did you offer to build me a school in exchange for dinner? Why did you come to my cottage asking for considerations? Why have you been watching me, following me, trying to isolate me from everyone who might protect me? The whispers grew louder. People were staring at Mercer now, seeing him differently. She's lying, Mercer said. But his voice had lost its smooth confidence. She's just trying to save herself. Am I? Margaret reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded paper. This is a letter from your own foreman. He came to me last night after the attack on my home. He's willing to testify about the fire at Chen's Laundry, about the men you hired for the shooting, about everything. Mercer's face went gray. That's impossible. Tom Bradley has a conscience, Mr. Mercer. He's lived with what you made him do for 3 years. He's tired of carrying your sins. Bradley's a drunk. No one will believe him. Maybe not. But combined with Chen's testimony and the widow Patterson's statement about threats her husband received before his death, and the records showing payments to the gunman. Margaret's voice hardened. I think a judge in Helena might find it very interesting. The room erupted. Everyone was talking at once. Board members shouted questions. Townspeople demanded answers. In the chaos, Mercer's composure finally cracked. You can't do this, he snarled, advancing on Margaret. You think you can come into my town and... Nate stepped between them. Touch her and I'll arrest you right here. On what charge? Assault. Arson. Conspiracy to commit murder. Nate's hand rested on his gun. Take your pick. You have no authority. I have every authority. I'm the sheriff. And you just threatened a citizen in front of 50 witnesses. The room went quiet. Mercer looked around at the faces staring back at him. Saw the fear transforming into something else. Something dangerous. This isn't over, he said softly. Yeah, Nate replied. It is. 2 deputies appeared at Mercer's elbows. Come with us, sir. We've got some questions about your business practices. Mercer went without resistance, but his eyes never left Margaret. The hatred in them was absolute. You'll regret this, he said as they led him out. Both of you. The door closed behind him. For a moment no one moved. Then Chen stood up in the back of the room. Thank you, he said simply. Thank you for fighting for us. Others joined in. The Fosters, the Wilsons, families Margaret had taught neighbors she'd befriended. One by one, they came forward, shaking her hand, embracing her, welcoming her in a way they never had before. Ruth appeared beside her, eyes bright with tears. You did it. We did it. Margaret squeezed her sister-in-law's hand. All of us. Nate pulled her close. It's not finished. Mercer will have lawyers' connections. This fight could take months. Then we'll fight for months. Margaret looked up at him. We'll fight for years if we have to. But we'll fight together. He kissed her forehead. Together. Above them, the church bells began to ring. Someone had heard the news, decided to celebrate. The sound echoed through the town, calling people out of their homes, bringing them together in the cold October night. Margaret stood in the doorway watching Copper Ridge transform. Watching fear turn to hope, isolation turn to community, strangers turn to family. She'd come here with nothing. Now she had everything. And no one, not Mercer, not anyone, would ever take that away. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Mercer brought lawyers from Denver, expensive men in expensive suits, who twisted words and challenged testimony and tried every trick in the book to discredit the evidence. But Tom Bradley held firm on the witness stand. So did Chen. So did the widow Patterson, who traveled 200 miles to tell the court what her husband had confided before his death. Margaret sat in the front row every day, Lily on her lap, watching justice unfold. The jury finds Jacob Mercer guilty on all counts. The courtroom erupted. People cheered, cried, embraced. Margaret felt Nate's hand close around hers, squeezing tight. It's over, she whispered. It's really over. Yeah. His voice was rough. It is. They led Mercer out in chains. As he passed their row, he stopped, turned to look at Margaret. You think you've won, he said quietly. But you haven't. You'll never be safe. Never be free. I have friends everywhere. Take him away, Nate ordered. The deputies dragged Mercer toward the door, but his words lingered cold as a grave. That night, Margaret couldn't sleep. She stood at the window of their new home, the house Nate had built for them on the edge of town, watching the stars. Lily was in her crib, sleeping peacefully. Nate was supposed to be sleeping too, but she heard his footsteps behind her. Can't rest either, he asked. Mercer's words keep playing in my head. He's going to prison for 20 years. He can't hurt us anymore. You don't know that. Margaret turned to face him. He has money, connections. What if he... Hey. Nate took her face in his hands. Look at me. Whatever comes, we face it together. That's what we promised. That's what we're gonna do. I'm scared, Nate. I know. So am I. He pulled her close. But I'm more scared of living without you than anything Mercer could do. And that fear, that's what keeps me fighting. Margaret buried her face in his chest. I love you. I love you too. Now come to bed. Tomorrow's a new day. But tomorrow brought news no one expected. Ruth burst through their door at dawn, face white as chalk. Mercer's dead. Margaret dropped the pan she was holding. What? They found him this morning. In his cell. Hanged himself with his own belt. Nate sat down heavily. God Almighty. The guards swear they checked on him every hour. Said he was fine at midnight, dead by 6. Ruth's voice shook. It's over, Nate. It's really over this time. Margaret should have felt relief. Instead, she felt nothing. Just a strange emptiness where the fear had been. What happens now? She asked. His property goes to the territory. The mines, the saloon, everything. Ruth managed a small smile. Chen's already talking about buying the laundry building back. Rebuilding proper this time. And the men who worked for Mercer? Most of them scattered after the verdict. The ones who stayed are looking for honest work. Ruth paused. Tom Bradley's asking about a deputy position. If you're willing to give him a chance. Nate looked at Margaret. She nodded. Tell him to come see me, Nate said. Everyone deserves a second chance. The weeks that followed brought healing. Margaret returned to teaching with renewed energy. Her students welcomed her back with drawings and handmade cards and sticky hugs that made her heart overflow. Mai Chen had learned to read while Margaret was occupied with the trial, practicing every night with her mother until she could manage simple sentences. "You taught me good, Mrs. Colton," Mai said proudly. "Even when you weren't here. You taught yourself, Mai. I just showed you how to start." The girl beamed. "Will you teach me more everything you know?" "Everything I know and then some." Ruth became a regular presence at their dinner table. She and Margaret had forged something unexpected during the crisis, not just tolerance, but genuine friendship. Ruth still spoke her mind with brutal honesty, still criticized Margaret's cooking, and questioned her housekeeping. But now there was love beneath the sharp words. "You're too soft on that girl," Ruth said one evening watching Lily toddle across the floor. "She's 18 months old." "Exactly. Time to start teaching her discipline." Ruth. Nate's voice held a warning. "What I'm just saying." "You're just saying what you always say." Margaret smiled. "And I appreciate it, but I'm going to raise my daughter my way." Ruth huffed. But later, when she thought no one was watching, Margaret caught her sneaking Lily an extra cookie. November arrived, with the first real cold. Margaret felt the change in her body before she knew what it meant. The tiredness, the queasiness in the mornings, the strange sensitivity to smells. She kept it secret for 2 weeks, afraid to hope, afraid to believe. But finally, when she could no longer ignore the signs, she went to see Doc Wilson. "Congratulations, Mrs. Colton." The old doctor smiled. "You're going to have a baby." Margaret pressed her hand to her stomach. "You're sure?" "Sure as I can be. I'd say about 2 months along. Should arrive sometime next summer." A baby. Nate's baby. Their baby. She ran all the way home. Nate was in the barn brushing down his horse when she found him. "Margaret, what's wrong? Why are you crying?" "I'm pregnant." The words tumbled out between sobs. "We're going to have a baby." Nate stared at her. His face went through a dozen emotions in seconds. Shock, disbelief, hope, fear, and finally joy so pure it transformed him. "A baby," he breathed. "Our baby." "Yes." He pulled her into his arms, lifting her off her feet, spinning her around until they were both dizzy. "A baby, Margaret. We're having a baby. Put me down. You'll make me sick." He set her down, but didn't let go. His hands framed her face, thumbs wiping away her tears. "I thought after Sarah, after Emma, I thought I'd never have this again." His voice cracked. "I thought God was punishing me, taking away any chance of being a father again." "You are a father." Margaret placed his hand on her belly. "You're Lily's father. You've been her father since the day you found us on that trail. But this is different. This is ours, yes, but not more, not better." She held his gaze. "Lily is your daughter, Nate. Blood or no blood. She loves you. You love her. That's what makes a family." His eyes filled. "How did I get so lucky?" "We got lucky together." They told Ruth that night at dinner. She screamed, actually screamed, loud enough that Lily started crying and the dog next door started barking. "A baby. We're having a baby." "We're having a baby," Margaret corrected. "You're having a niece or nephew." "Same thing." Ruth pulled her into a crushing hug. "Oh, Margaret. Oh, this is wonderful. This is the best news. When is it coming?" "June. Doc Wilson thinks." "June. That's only 7 months. We have so much to do. We need to make clothes and buy furniture and—" Ruth stopped, tears streaming down her face. "I'm going to be an aunt. A real aunt." "You're already a real aunt," Nate said quietly. "Lily's been calling you Aunt Ruth for weeks." Ruth looked at the toddler, who was watching the adults with bewildered fascination. "Aunt Ruth!" Lily shouted happily. Ruth burst into fresh tears. Christmas came to Copper Ridge with 3 feet of snow and more joy than the town had seen in years. The church was decorated with evergreen boughs and candles. Someone had found red ribbons somewhere, strung them along the pews. The whole town turned out for the service, packed in so tight people were standing against the walls. Reverend Whitmore's sermon was about redemption, about second chances, about finding light in darkness and hope in despair. "A year ago," he said, looking out at his congregation, "this town was living in fear. Fear of one man, fear of his power, fear of what might happen if anyone dared to challenge him." His eyes found Margaret in the crowd. But fear doesn't win. It never wins. Because there will always be people brave enough to stand up, to speak out, to fight for what's right. He smiled. "This Christmas we celebrate more than the birth of our Savior. We celebrate the rebirth of our town, the rebirth of our community, the rebirth of hope." After the service, there was a celebration at the boarding house. Food and music and laughter, children running everywhere, adults sharing stories and memories. William Chen brought his family. Tom Bradley came with his wife, sober now for 2 months and counting. Even the widow Patterson had traveled back for the occasion. Margaret stood in this corner watching it all, her hand resting on the slight swell of her belly. "Penny, for your thoughts." Ruth appeared beside her. "Just thinking about how different everything is. A year ago, I was dying on a trail with nothing but a baby and a prayer. And now I have a husband, a daughter, another baby on the way, a home, a family." Margaret's eyes filled. "I have everything, Ruth. Everything I thought I'd lost forever." Ruth squeezed her hand. "You fought for it, every bit of it. We fought for it, all of us." "Mama!" Lily came running, arms outstretched. Margaret scooped her up, pressing kisses to her chubby cheeks. "What is it, baby?" "Papa." Lily pointed across the room to where Nate stood talking with the Reverend. "Want Papa?" Margaret carried her over, sliding under Nate's arm, as naturally as breathing. "Someone wants you," she said. Nate took Lily, settling her on his hip. "What do you need, little one?" "Up," Lily demanded. "Higher." He lifted her above his head, making her squeal with delight. Margaret watched them, her husband and daughter playing and laughing perfectly at ease, and felt her heart expand until she thought it might burst. "Nate." He looked at her, Lily still giggling in his arms. "Yeah. I love you. I love you too." He leaned down, kissed her softly. "Both of you. All of you. All of us," Margaret agreed. "That's what we are now. All of us together." The months passed in a blur of happiness. Margaret's belly grew. Lily learned to say baby, and would press her ear against her mother's stomach, listening for movement. Nate built a cradle, carved it himself, working every night after supper until his hands were raw and the wood gleamed smooth. "It's beautiful," Margaret said when he showed her. "It's for our son. Or daughter. Either one." He ran his hand over the curved rails. "I made one like this for Emma. Smaller, simpler, but the same idea." His voice caught. "I burned it after she died. Couldn't stand looking at it." "Nate, this one's different. This one's for the future, not the past." He looked at her. "I'm not forgetting them, Margaret. Sarah and Emma. They're part of me. They always will be. I know. But I'm done living in grief. Done punishing myself for things I couldn't control." He pulled her close, resting his chin on her head. "You taught me that. You and Lily. You taught me it's okay to be happy again." We taught each other. June arrived with wildflowers and warm winds. Margaret's labor started on a Tuesday morning 2 weeks earlier than expected. Nate rode for the doctor while Ruth stayed with her, holding her hand through contractions that felt like they might tear her apart. "You're doing fine," Ruth kept saying. You're doing perfect. Just breathe. Easy for you to say. Margaret gasped. You're not the one pushing a watermelon out of your... The next contraction cut off her words. Doc Wilson arrived just in time. Nate burst through the door moments later, white-faced and terrified. How is she? Is she okay? Is the baby? Out. Ruth pushed him back. You'll see them when it's over. Go wait downstairs. But... Now, Nathaniel. He went. Margaret heard him pacing below, heard the floorboards creak with every step, heard Ruth threatening to tie him to a chair if he didn't stop. One more push, Doc Wilson said. One more and it'll be over. Margaret pushed, screamed, pushed again. And then a cry, thin and angry and absolutely perfect. It's a boy, Doc Wilson announced. A healthy baby boy. Margaret reached for her son, tears streaming down her face. He was small and red and furious fists waving in the air like he was already ready to fight the world. Hello, little one, she whispered. Hello, my baby. The door burst open. Nate stood there, chest heaving, eyes wild. Is she? Are they? Come meet your son, Margaret said. He crossed the room in 3 strides, knelt beside the bed, looked at the baby in Margaret's arms. My son, he breathed. Our son. What should we name him? Nate was quiet for a moment. What about Michael? After your husband. And James, after my father. Margaret's throat tightened. Michael James Colton. Michael James Colton. Nate touched the baby's cheek with one gentle finger. Welcome to the world, little man. You're going to be loved. So loved. The door opened again. Ruth appeared with Lily in her arms. Someone wants to meet her brother. They settled Lily on the bed beside Margaret. The toddler stared at the baby with huge, serious eyes. Baby, she asked. Yes, sweetheart, this is your brother. Michael. Lily leaned forward, pressed a wet kiss to Michael's forehead. My baby. Yes. Margaret laughed through her tears. Your baby. Our baby. Our family. She looked around the room, Ruth wiping her eyes. Nate gazing at his son with wonder. Lily already protective of her new brother. And Michael small and perfect, the living proof that life could begin again. 2 years ago, she'd been dying on a trail with nothing but a prayer. Now she had everything. The years that followed proved that happiness wasn't a destination. It was a journey. There were hard times. Winters when the snow came too fast and the supplies ran low. Summers when drought threatened the crops and tensions ran high. Days when Margaret was exhausted from teaching and mothering and being everything to everyone. Nights when Nate came home late from a difficult case, weary to his bones. But through it all, they had each other. Michael grew from a furious baby into a curious toddler, into a bright, adventurous boy who asked 1,000 questions a day and never seemed to run out of energy. Lily grew into a gentle, thoughtful girl who loved books and music and had her stepfather wrapped around her little finger. Another baby came a daughter they named Emma Ruth for the child Nate had lost, and the sister who had become Margaret's closest friend. And then another, a son called Patrick William, for Margaret's brother and Chen, who had stood by them through everything. 4 children, Ruth said one evening, surveying the chaos of the Colton household. You've certainly been busy. Quality and quantity, Margaret replied, catching Patrick before he could put a bug in his mouth. We believe in both. Nate laughed from his chair by the fire, Emma asleep on his chest. We believe in chaos mostly. Same thing. The children grew. The town grew. Copper Ridge transformed from a rough mining settlement into a proper community with a real schoolhouse and a library and streets that actually had names. William Chen was elected to the town council, then the territorial legislature. Tom Bradley became a respected lawman, eventually taking over as sheriff when Nate stepped down. I'm getting too old for this work, Nate said on his last day, handing over his badge. You're 45. Exactly. ancient. He pulled Margaret close. Besides, I've got better things to do with my time. Like what? Like spoiling my grandchildren. Margaret stared at him. What grandchildren? The ones Lily's going to give us. Nate grinned. She told me this morning. She's expecting. Her and that Wilson boy finally did something right. Tommy Wilson. She's marrying Tommy Wilson. Been courting for 2 years, Margaret. Don't tell me you didn't notice. She hadn't noticed. She'd been too busy with the younger children with teaching with life. But now that she thought about it, the signs had all been there. The way Lily blushed when Tommy's name came up. The way Tommy found excuses to visit to help with chores to stay for dinner. Our daughter, Margaret said slowly. Our Lily, having a baby. Seems fitting, don't you think, given how we started? It did seem fitting. A circle closing, a story continuing. That night, Margaret stood on the porch of their home watching the stars. She thought about the woman she'd been desperate dying holding a knife on a stranger, because it was the only way she knew to protect her child. She thought about all the miles she'd traveled, all the grief she'd carried, all the love she'd found. Penny for your thoughts. Nate appeared beside her, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. I was thinking about the day we met. Ah. He handed her a cup. The day you tried to kill me with a rusty knife. I wasn't trying to kill you. Could have fooled me. I was trying to protect Lily. I know. He slipped his arm around her. That's why I fell in love with you. Right there in that moment. Watching you hold that knife with hands that could barely hold it, ready to die for your daughter. He kissed her temple. Bravest thing I ever saw. I was terrified. That's what made it brave. They stood together watching the stars wheel overhead. The same stars they'd watched on their first night in this house, on their wedding night, on the nights when babies were born, and losses were mourned, and life in all its complicated glory unfolded around them. Do you ever regret it? Margaret asked. Stopping that day, picking up a broken woman and her baby. Never. Nate's voice was firm. Not for 1 second. You saved me, Margaret. You and Lily. You gave me a reason to live again. We saved each other. Yeah. He pulled her closer. We did. From inside the house, a child's voice called out. Mama, Papa Michael's being mean. Margaret laughed. Duty calls. Always does. They walked inside together into the warmth and noise and beautiful chaos of their family. 4 children, one on the way to being a grandmother, a town that had become home, a life built from ashes and love, and the stubborn refusal to give up. Margaret Sullivan had come to Montana Territory with nothing. Now she had everything. And as she gathered her children for dinner, as Nate lifted Emma onto his shoulders, as Lily's laughter mixed with Michael's protests and Patrick's babbling, she knew the truth that had guided her through every hardship. Love wasn't something you found. It was something you built. Brick by brick, day by day, choice by choice. And once you built it, once you fought for it, once you refused to let it go, it became unbreakable. It became forever. It became home.